If you haven't heard, the Redeemed Backslider podcast and the Pentecostal Lighthouse of Visalia is getting ready to host Unshackled, a conference that is specifically geared for prodigals and the families of prodigals. It's taking place March 6th, 7th, and 8th at the Pentecostal Lighthouse Church. We are attaching the flyer to this podcast, and you're welcome to follow us on social media for more information. You can also email us or visit the website, theredeemedbackslider.org or pentecostallighthouse.net. We hope that you will make plans to come. We are expecting a wonderful presence of God. This episode has been sponsored by my friend and dentist, Dr. Craig Cedillo at Smile Visalia. If you're looking for a dentist, you won't find a better one in Tulare County. He specializes in all your dentistry needs, plus cosmetic dentistry and ortho. His phone number is 559-734-7035. If you call him, please tell him that Kathy from the Redeemed Backslider podcast sent you. Thank you so much.
Welcome to the Redeemed Backslider with your host, Kathy Chastain, Christian-based psychotherapist and redeemed backslider. This podcast is dedicated to those who have wandered but are ready to return to the life-changing power of grace and the freedom found in Jesus.
Hi, welcome to the Redeemed Backslider. I'm your host, Kathy Chastain. I'm a Christian-based psychotherapist and a Redeemed Backslider. With me today from Louisiana is Dustin Long. Dustin is the president and CEO of High Hopes Ministries, which is a ministry to prodigals and their families. And we were connected just by the Lord, by chance, from a prodigal that I interviewed, had told me about this ministry. And so I was very anxious to connect with him, but also to hear his story of redemption. And so, Dustin, thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you, Kathy. I want to just let you know I appreciate everything you're doing, and it's such a faith builder, not just to families who are walking this journey, but also to those who might still be out there and struggling and going through to hear a testimony and that they've overcome. You're building faith and you're building the kingdom, and I appreciate everything you do. It's an honor to be here today.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, I love what you guys are doing too. You guys have... You can tell us about that at the end, but God is really just building his kingdom, I think, in this last hour and calling the prodigals home and, just really reaching for those who have a heart for him deep down, regardless of whatever wounds or struggles that they have suffered through in life. He is redeeming his people, I believe.
Absolutely. Absolutely. He's using those wounds. Yeah.
Yeah.
Where you've been is usually where your ministry is going to be. Yeah.
Yes. Isn't that so true? And I don't know that people actually know that, shame gets used against people so often. But I think they even said at Landmark, but I've heard it also before, that whatever you have overcome, you have the authority to help deliver someone else in that same area. So if you've been healed of cancer, you have the authority to pray for someone to be healed of cancer, and et cetera. So,
amen.
Well, Dustin, I really don't know your history. I know little bits and pieces. So if you don't mind, would you just share a little bit about your upbringing and your history with the Lord and what drew you away from the Lord and what life was like for you?
Yeah, absolutely, Kathy. I couldn't have been born into a greater church, a greater home. I was born at my family. I'm third generation at the Pentecostals of Alexandria.
One of the greatest churches for anybody who's familiar with Pentecost. They're one of the greatest churches around.
Well, and it's a blessing, and the Mangans are the greatest, most loving people
Mm,
probably that I know. I know there are a lot of great pastors, and everybody should
sure.
feel their church is the best, obviously. But I genuinely feel my pastors in my church exemplify God's love greater than no other. And my mother and dad were also like that. They were. I can't look back and say that there was anything I could put on them or blame them. They were involved in ministry. They were involved in for my entire life. I mean, I was raised, Bishop G.A. Mangan, the elder Mangan, who's going on to be with the Lord, started 24-hour prayer at the POA, and I remember with my parents going and spending the night 3 hours in the middle of the night sleeping under pews, while they
Mm-hmm.
prayed for 3 hours, and home
Mm-hmm.
Bible studies, and just continuously involved in something. And even to this day, now, they started their Hope Prodigal ministry because of me, but they've always been involved in ministries. So I grew up with a love for God. I mean, I grew up with a heart for God, and really from a young age knew that God had something for me. Didn't really know what that looked like, but knew I enjoyed, serving in His kingdom. I enjoyed going to church, being around church, and at the age of 15, I do remember God calling me to the serve full time in the ministry, and I followed that call at 21, moved to San Antonio to become actually an assistant youth pastor out there. And then my uncle, Daryl Weber, who is now my general superintendent here in Louisiana, was starting a church in Lafayette, Louisiana, and asked me to follow him there. And so I did. I followed him there, and it was a beautiful thing starting in a living room, and then seeing that church grow tremendously, and just being a small part of that. Um, so that so God allowed that for I did that. It was 6 7 years, somewhere around 6 7 years, I believe, and then I was just sitting at dinner one night. And with my family, I had my wife then, um, and I were at dinner, and we had a little baby girl, new baby girl. I think she's 3 4 months old then, and I got a call out of the blue, Kathy. I had no idea. I hadn't applied for anything, but a pharmaceutical sales manager contacted me
Okay, so
and said, "Hey,
you were in ministry full time, and you got a pharmaceutical sales call.
yeah, just out of the blue."
Wow, wow.
And so he said he'd seen my resume on monster.com, which that shows you I don't even know if Monster still exists, or, but he saw it on there, and was just wondering if I'd be interested in meeting him for lunch the next day just to talk about the job. So I did. Not really thinking there would be, because that's a very tough industry to get into, to crack your, especially just right out of college. I just
Mm-hmm.
graduated. So I met him, and he called me that night and offered me the position. And so I'll be very
That's
transparent. I
unheard
didn't.
of. That is very
Yeah,
unheard of.
yeah.
Yeah.
It was. And so it's definitely. I didn't pray about this decision. I didn't go seek counsel of my pastors, my uncle, who was my pastor at the time, or even my pastors in Alexandria. My parents didn't seek any counsel, didn't pray about it. And the catch was that it was initially supposed to be, there, so I thought I could do both things, but come to find out there was a glitch. So they said, look, you can either go to Roanoke, Virginia, or wait for the next position to come, whenever that might be. And not knowing if that would ever happen, I jumped on it, and I said, I'll take it. And packed my family, moved to Roanoke, and left everything to do with ministry. I left my office at the church there, didn't touch anything, just left everything. Packed a U-Haul and left. And I still believe that I could possibly um, maintain a relationship with God and maybe find something there in Roanoke. I kind of in my mind said, hey, look, this is God, a God
Mm-hmm.
opportunity. Um, but remember, I hadn't prayed or fasted, and so I moved to Roanoke, and little by little, just to kind of fast forward, little by little, you know, I went places that morally I never thought I would go. It just and it wasn't a quick fall, but it was just letting go of little things at a time. And so had great success. Moved back to Alexandria because the understanding was that when a position came back up in Louisiana, that they'd roll me back over there to get closer to family. So and we had another little girl on the way, and so a position came up open in Alexandria. I took that. Very successful, 3 Presidents Clubs, great opportunity. And then another opportunity opened up in oncology based out of Austin, Texas. So, and that was in 2007. And so I took that position and found myself flying 3 to 4 nights a week or days a week and spending nights in hotels. And it just led to more opportunities, a lifestyle that was so far from God, but it was feeding everything I wanted in the flesh because there was very little God, if any, in my life, and
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of flesh. I like to say Psalm or Proverbs 10:23 says it's as sport for a fool to do mischief. And that's exactly what my life was. It was a sport, it was a game, it was all about conquering the next thing. Whatever my flesh desired, I pursued it and pursued it with everything.
So,
So
Dustin, when you when you were in ministry and this call came, were you like in a dry season with the Lord? Like, how were you able to leave your office untouched and just pack up so easily unless you were already struggling someplace in your life or feeling like you were in a lull or unfulfilled? Like, do you look back and where were you at that time for all of these doors to just open so easily and quickly?
that's a very good question, Kathy, because I know exactly where I was. I was in a place of um, I had been asked, and there's an episode coming out pretty soon on our podcast that my uncle and I sit down and talk. But I was in a place where he had asked something of me, and I didn't agree with it at the time. Um, and him being the pastor, it was a submission issue on my part, a submission issue of, and what he was asking, he actually was right in retrospect. Looking back, I mean, he was older, he was wiser, he was the pastor of the church.
What did he
I
ask
was
of you?
young. It was simply something to do as far as youth service schedule, and it wasn't a big
Okay.
deal actually. Yeah, it was something very to do with adjusting the youth service schedule. So it was actually very minuscule, but at the time I allowed it in my spirit to
Because that
fester.
happens. Offense happens
Yeah,
so easily in the church that
yeah,
opens that door.
yeah. I allowed that to happen, um, and I allowed that to fester. And so as I allowed that to fester, when the first opportunity came, I used it as a way to get out. So that was a good and in our episode we'll talk about how that the episode that my uncle and I talk we'll talk about how that affected he and I later in life, me more than him,
Mm-hmm.
with the consequences. But so yeah, I was, and that goes back to you know well, I'll address that here in a second. I want to say in Austin, I was living, I had everything I wanted. I mean, living life experiences, traveling places in the world. I never thought, I mean, life was good. I was living in sin, and honestly, I was loving it, loving every bit of it. Love Austin.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
So was that
and then I,
clubs? Was that houses? Was that cars? Was that
a-
just
all of it.
influence of all the powerful people? Like,
all of it, all of it. And I was just meeting people that had lots of influence, lots of
Mm-hmm.
power, and um, in both worlds, not only in the in the financial world or even in the pharmaceutical world, but also in the club world, people that could get me into places and all around that I wanted to get into. And so it was just I was lost. I was lost. I was dead spiritually.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I remember, I can't tell you exactly why, Kathy, but in June or July of 2012, I was actually flying into Houston, and I had organized a speaker program with a key opinion leader out of MD Anderson. And I landed in Houston. And when I landed in Houston, I don't know why, I can't explain it to you, but for some reason, I could not, I couldn't do the program. So I called my counterparts and I said, hey, look, y'all, I can't do this tonight. Y'all are going to have to cover for me. And when I did that, I got in my rental car in Houston, drove it all the way back to Austin, picked up my car at the airport. And on the way home from the airport, I bought the biggest bottle of vodka that you can buy. I think they call it a handle or something like that. But to that point, I was functioning. I worked. I didn't have, I wasn't an alcoholic. I wasn't a drug addict. Now, I abused them on weekends and partying, but then I'd go work the rest of the week and I'd be high functioning. And so I bought that bottle of vodka on the way home, and Kathy, for the next, I would say, well, it was until November, from June or July till November, I drank myself. Um, my, I would wake up, and as soon as I woke up, I would drink myself back to sleep. I just wanted to be numb. I wanted to numb out. I didn't want to feel anything. I didn't want to, I just wanted to lay there and drink, and it brought me to a terrible, terrible place. I just, I literally almost lost my life. I went from 185 pounds down to like 140. It was terrible.
What was
And
causing that desire to be numb? Do you know what was it? A particular thing? Were you feeling conviction? Like, what happened that made that shift take place from being high functioning to then now just totally wanting to be numb for all those months?
I have to be very careful in that answer because it involves
Okay.
I was dealing I was dealing a lot with a lot in the home, and that and so it caught up with me. It
Yeah.
caught up
Okay.
with me,
Yeah.
and I have to be very delicate there. But
Sure.
it caught up with me, and a lot of that I have to say, a lot of that I have to say was me not being the man of God or the man that I should be.
Mm-hmm.
So it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't one person or the other. It was a combination of two
Yeah.
lives that were brought to a place where I was miserable. So in November, I was driven to a 5-day detox facility in Austin. I was so bad off they had to drive me across the street first to the ER just to stabilize me. And my BAC was 0.467,
Oh, you could have
which
died.
is it was
Yeah.
lethal. Yeah,
Yes, it
yeah.
is. Yeah.
And so
Wow.
they told me, they put me, when they drove me back across the street, they put me on suicide watch, obviously for that high of a blood alcohol level. Thank God I lived. But here's the interesting part, Kathy. Just to kind of get you, to kind of, I was in that facility for 5 days. On the last night I was there, I was in the bathroom shaving, which was they let you do that the last night. And there was a male nurse in that bathroom, and he walked in and he closed the bathroom door. And the protocol was that he had to be in there with me, since I was shaving with a razor. and he closed the door, which, that wasn't really protocol. The doors were all supposed to be open. And he just stopped and he asked me, he said, Dustin, he said, have you ever been filled with the Holy Ghost?
Oh,
And
wow.
I said, and look, I wasn't, at that point in my life, I was just ready to get out of there, see what I could do to get back to my job, my family, repair everything I had damaged. I wasn't interested in talking about God. My mind still wasn't there. It was just still so messed up. And I really didn't want to talk about this, but I just told him, I said, yes, I have. And he said, Dustin, I know. He said, because there is a light around you. And he said, the glory of God is in this bathroom. And he said,
Wow.
God still has a purpose and a plan for you. And he told me some more things that some of which I just don't remember. But here's the thing that's interesting, and I have to just quickly back up. My mother and I and my father and I had been estranged for several years at this point. They didn't know what was going on with me. They didn't know where I was. They didn't know what shape I was in, what was going on in my life. But my mom had been on a 70-day fast for me. 70.
Wow.
And it wasn't 70 days of no food and just water. God would tell her every day what to fast, whether it be food. No, didn't she didn't drink coffee, which to her, she and I, those are too big. That's a big thing, coffee.
Yeah.
But she'd stopped drinking coffee, and she also fasted food many days. She fasted. God would speak to her each day. But during that 70-day fast, and while I was in this detox facility, God spoke to a pastor's wife in Colorado who I knew. And this lady will come into my story later. She's actually was she and her husband out of Alexandria, pastoring her church in Colorado. She was in a Walmart parking lot in Colorado, and God said, "Call Diane Long. We've got to pray for Michael to stand up on Dustin's behalf." Now she's talking about the archangel Michael,
Mm-hmm.
and our bishop Anthony Mangan had preached a sermon in 2007, I believe, on when Michael stood up, and
Mm.
so Jamie was, uh, she was the pastor's wife, and when she called mom, she said, "Diane, we got to pray for Michael to stand up." So they did. They bound together, prayed, and prayed that Michael stood up. And I didn't know any of this. My mother and father didn't know where I was. Jamie didn't know where I was, and so let's go back to the bathroom in the detox facility and that gentleman. And so he told me a few more things that I did not, I really don't remember, but they were powerful. And my mind was just kind of spinning from all of this. And he turns and he said, "Look, if you need anything else before you leave," he said, "My name is Michael."
Wow. Wow.
I didn't know the
Wow.
impact of that. I didn't know the impact of that. I didn't know the impact of how that even played into anything at
Wow.
all until a year or so down the road, which was a beautiful time of I ended up going to a 30-day rehab after that, came home. My wife then left and took the kids, and it was around Christmas, and I spent Christmas Eve. I had toys, everything. I spent Christmas Eve by myself. I don't know how I made it home. Drank myself silly. Went out in Austin. Drank myself silly. Christmas Day, drank myself silly. After getting out of a rehab, and then I called a friend in Alexandria, excuse me, who was struggling at the time himself, really, really bad with heroin. One of my best friends, and I called him and I said, "Hey, look, if you don't come get me, I don't know if I'll make it through the night." And he drove all the way to Austin, picked
Mm.
me up, and drove me back to Alexandria. And I walked back in the doors for the first time to my parents' house in I don't know how many years, broken, messed up, um, just so damaged, going through so much guilt, so much shame, and they just opened their arms and loved me. And
Yeah.
it was a powerful, powerful, powerful moment. And so since 20, and I would love to say, hey, look, that's how the story ended, and God did great things. But it was a long process, and we can talk about that in a second. But I will tell you this: in 2015, because I moved back to Austin in 2013, because I wanted to be close to my family, still trying to do it my way. And I did that a couple of times actually. But in 2013, moved back to Austin. Finally came back, spent a year in 2014 to 2015 in the faith-based rehab. Um, which I'll tell you that was voluntary, Kathy, but I made a commitment to my dad that I would do that because I was ready to surrender. And I went into that thing thinking that, hey, it's a faith-based rehab and God's going to, I'm going to finally get right with God, whatever. And when I went into that thing, God spoke to me because it was, I don't want to knock it, but it was anything but faith-based. You got very little God in there. It was a lot of work and a lot of, but I stuck to it because I told my dad. But God told me, he said, Dustin, your entire life, we talked about the blessings of being raised in the POA and the blessings uh, of having just in that atmosphere and feeling that. But there's also kind of maybe a I don't want to say not a curse in any way, but you can live in the overflow and you can live off of the overflow and the
Yes.
anointing
Take it for
and all
granted.
you can take it for granted and you can almost operate robotically just because you've been raised in such a atmosphere and you didn't never had to dig. And that's where I really feel like in Lafayette, I had a great ministry, a powerful ministry in San Antonio, and I had been preaching out, and God allowed great things for me there, but I had never really dug deep and found God for myself, and gotten that deep relationship and fallen in love with His Word, other than to preach a sermon, fallen in love with just that relationship with Him.
Right.
And so he told me that if you want me, you're going to have to find me yourself this year. So that's what I did. When they were playing games or had free time, when they were playing pool or watching a movie in free time, I was in the chapel just digging in the Word, just digging in the Word. And I came home in 2015 after graduating that, and the pastor and pastor's wife in Colorado had resigned their church there and moved back to Alexandria, which was amazing, about a month or two before I came home. And so the beautiful thing about this is that when I came home, Jamie and I connected, and she was such an integral part in my restoration, such a powerful part, not in just what had happened prior, but because I'll never forget it. We were praying at the altar one night after service, and she had come up, walked up behind me, and was just praying with me. And then she just stepped back and she said, "Oh my God, Dustin, you've been molested." Now, Kathy, nobody knew this other than my parents and our pastors from way this was from late 70s, early 80s. That's 5, 6 years old. Nobody knew this. God revealed this to Jamie, and she said, "We've got to heal this. God's got to heal this." So we stayed, she and I, by ourselves, 3 hours in the congregation, in the sanctuary that night, just crying. I was just laid over on her shoulder, just crying. There are pictures of it. And then the next night, 6 hours at my parents' house, just God doing a work and healing that. And so that really began a time of restoration and transformation once we got to that point and really found the root of a lot of things that I don't want to say excuses, Kathy, but as you know, and as I know with what I'm walking into right now and the program I'm in, and please excuse my voice, it's I've been sick for a few days, so we're powering through this, but we know that unresolved childhood trauma, it it can cause disease later in life. It can
Yeah.
cause
Yeah.
substance abuse. It can cause so many things. And so to really uncover that and unpack that begin a true healing in me. And then ever
Does
since then, it's been a process.
up until that time when she spoke that, were you carrying that with you daily, or had you suppressed it and forgot about it and just put it away?
Completely suppressed it. It was completely suppressed, which we know
Yeah.
our brains is not built to suppress
Right.
traumatic.
Right. Yeah, I think so many people that live through that childhood molestation or abuse of any kind, um, there's nothing you could do. I feel like it's kind of like grief. How do I ever accept the loss of someone I love that has died? There's no way to accept that. So you just endure it and you have to just keep going. And I feel like it's such a similar thing. There's no way to get over it. It's just something you have to live with. But that creates deep, deep, deep wounds, especially as a child, not having any capacity cognitively to understand it or talk through it, or the shame.
Well, that's exactly right, and that's and look, to be very fair, I don't blame anyone. I don't blame my parents.
Right.
There were in the late '70s, early '80s, very little resources and not as much
Right.
knowledge as there is now and access. Um, and 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 I don't I don't want it to ever sound like that I
Oh,
blame. It's
yeah,
been
no.
dealt with, but that is true. And now that we have awareness, and that's why High Hope exists, is, and like you said, we'll talk about that, but it's 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 really at the crux of it is I feel like if we can start, and I feel like it's happening to an extent better,
Yeah.
but if we start asking, instead of what's wrong with you, asking what happened to you,
Yes.
if we can be curious and ask, because at the root of everything is not, I don't believe, is not a completely rebellious spirit. I believe that
Right.
spirits do creep in and take advantage of past
Yes.
traumas or experiences. And it doesn't have to be molestation, it doesn't, whatever it is.
Right.
And I know we'll talk a little bit about that in a little bit, but I feel like if we can just become curious and look at people and ask them, instead of what's wrong with you, why are you so and just
Yes.
start saying, tell me what happened to you.
Yeah. Right. From a place of compassion to really know and to love a person. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you're right. I read some in one of the books that the enemy is an opportunist. He comes to take
Hmm.
advantage of where a person is. So if something hurts me, just by our humanity, just by the nature of friendships or the nature of, growing up in a household, like normal things are going to happen in life.
Hmm.
But when the enemy comes in and takes opportunity to dig that wound deeper and amplify that pain, it's a whole different level of hurt and sorrow that leads to rebellion, even though the heart's posture is not necessarily to be rebellious. It's just trying to survive, I think, most of the time.
Exactly. And that's exactly right. And to kind of give an overview, I know you and I have talked on the phone about we're in the midst of writing a curriculum, and it's been an amazing journey, because God just kind of, and I know this has been spoken of and even written about a lot, but First Peter 5-7, where Peter gives this order of add to your faith virtue, to your
Yes.
virtue knowledge. And so I started just digging into that, and starting with faith, I really started, and I looked at,
Hmm.
was before the fall of man, was there faith? Was there a need for faith? And I started really digging into that deep and looking at it. And you know, in the beginning, before the fall, there wasn't a need for redemptive faith. It was just a trust, knowing. It's like the air we breathe. We don't have to think about it. God walked
Yeah.
with them. They had all the provision. They had everything they needed. It was just a trust. And you go look in the faith, the Hall of Fame faith chapter, Hebrews 11, the first one mentioned was Abel. Because before Abel, before the fall, there was no need for it. And so why? Because that connection with God was broken.
Right.
That and there was shame and guilt through Adam and Eve. And so then we see with Cain and Abel the first example of faith. Abel had it, Cain didn't have it. Because Abel gave his best, Cain held back. And so what we see is that at that loss of connection with God, it created distrust and it created
Mm-hmm.
a breach in trust. And so that faith is the foundation. And so Second Peter really begins where Eden ended. And that's what we are basing our curriculum on,
I
is
love that.
how do we start. It's everything falls and or starts with a foundation of rebuilding a foundation of faith in themselves, whoever they are. Like myself, I've got to believe in myself. I've got to believe in others. I've got to believe that
Right.
others are good. And I have to, but ultimately that connection with God and have that faith, that redemptive faith in
Mm-hmm.
Him. And that's where First Peter is trying to get us back. It's trying to build us back from the agape love that they first had in the garden
Mm-hmm.
that fell. Now we start with brotherly love and then familial love, and there are Greek words, and I'm not going to go into all our study, but we're trying to get back to that. And Second Peter 7 ends with charity. That's the ultimate goal, that agape love of God. That's what we're
Mm-hmm.
trying to get back to. And so if we can at the all I was trying to say there is that if we can recognize that at some point we're born in sin, and whether a parent and our trust in the beginning is nurtured, our faith is nurtured by those earliest influences in our life, whether it
Right.
be parents or family members or Sunday school teachers. And if that trust is broken at some point, and it may not be by molestation or something hard, it could be they might have a lack of faith. They may be going to church every Sunday, but not believing in God
Right.
to handle
Right.
this situation or that situation. So it damages our faith. And so, whatever the situation is, there is something at the root of that
Yeah.
that has caused these individuals or backsliders, prodigals, their faith to be cracked. And the enemy, as you said, to get back to it, has capitalized on that.
Right.
And so that's why I just wish we would become more curious and less
Yes.
quick to judge.
Yes. I feel like there is a shift taking place in our Christian culture, our Pentecostal apostolic Christian culture, that is becoming more like that compared to what it was like in the 70s and 80s when you and I were
Oh,
children
yeah.
growing up in it. I feel like that there's a different level of understanding and compassion for people, but I think it's what you said. There's more resources available. Mental health has come to the foreground of so many things, and people in the church are beginning to talk about their own
Yeah.
struggles, where before, if you were struggling, it was because you didn't have enough faith, you didn't believe in God. But we see that that's just not true. The process of humanity and living life, we live in a fallen world. We're going to struggle no matter how
Yeah.
much we love God.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it is getting, I think, more open now.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I want to go back and ask you about being called at 15. As I talk to prodigals through the course of the podcast, and I know that you do as well, I feel like there seems to be a common thread, and that is that many of them knew the Lord. Obviously, they're a prodigal. They loved the Lord, and I think they probably lived in the overflow. Some had a relationship with God. Some had the Holy Ghost at 3 years old and 4 years old. And I think I was like 8 years old. Very early, like we had a very real relationship with the Lord. And I think we saw things from such an innocent lens, but then we grow up and life seems to happen and pull us away. So with you being 15, you heard the call of God on your life, and it took you all the way to 21. Did you say 18 or 21 until you got to live that out?
It was actually till about 25.
Okay.
25. Yeah.
So could you talk a little bit about how did God call you? What did that look like for you? And what did you do with that at age 15 while you were still going through school and becoming an adult? How did you put it away? Did it give you purpose? Was it, the energy behind getting up every day, or did you just, take it for granted? Like what did that look like for you?
I think to be fair, it was a combination of both. I knew, and I was given opportunities at a young age, to answer that in various ways, to even fulfill that in various ways. But at the same time, and I feel like this is more of a personal deficit in myself. I didn't dig into it like I felt I should, because I feel like it was also because I received some. There's a term that I've learned in the Townsend Institute. It's premature encouragement, or before you've really earned something. So I feel like to an extent that kind of carried me and said, hey, yes, there was a lot of pride. There was a lot of pride in me, and that's been one of my biggest struggles to overcome. So I feel like it was dear and deep to me, that call, and very humbling. But I feel like my pride and my lack of self-discipline, I wanted both. Even as from a young age, I wanted both. And by both, I mean to have a good time and play basketball, baseball, football, just the normal thing, girls, the normal thing that you do as a teenager, but also walk with God. So I felt like there was this pull between the two. I'm not talking about I was a bad teenager. I was involved heavily in church, but there was also a part of me that was just I would focus a lot on the fun things and not digging in deep. And I really haven't, and I'll be honest with you, I haven't dug deep to see what that may have come from, because that even carried over into school. Honestly, I didn't have to study that much in high school. I'd made good grades, not having to study, and that hit me hard in college. I had to figure that out pretty quick. But so I don't know, Kathy. I feel like it was just a combination of everything, because you receive so much at POA and have the best preachers and the best singing and the best evangelists come through, and the Sunday school teachers. You get taught and fed so much. It almost, I guess, it can become, for some, if they allow it, like me, you just get fat and not and just consume,
Off everybody else's. Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be easy to do, I would think.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I would guess also that there was a knowing in your spirit that you were called. So, back to kind of, because God gives us a sense of things, I think, within ourselves. So when that confirmation comes, it's easily accepted. And then you just maybe wait for God to do that in your life. So I was just curious, because it seems like that tension, that you described between trying to be a normal teenager, but also trying to fulfill a calling. It's difficult for people. I think a lot of kiddos live in that tension and not really knowing where the balance should be or could be in that. I think for adults as well.
Oh, yeah, yeah, for adults as well, absolutely.
Um, okay. Okay, I asked that. I just was looking at the questions I wrote as you were talking. So I'm always interested in like when the first door gets open to the backslider. What was it in you? You said there was already a little bitterness. You were already kind of predisposed to kind of want to get out. Do you feel like being separated in Virginia led to it being easier for you to start saying yes to things that you knew you shouldn't, that isolation? Or
For sure, because I was disconnected from really any accountability or root system, my tribe. I really had no zero accountability. And truthfully, for the first time, I felt like and it felt good. I felt like I blended. I was just anonymous. Nobody was looking at me. I wasn't in a, I wasn't being, I don't want to say judged, but you understand what I'm saying. I
yeah,
wasn't,
right.
I didn't have to hide. And I feel like a lot of that comes from goes all the way back to what we talked about earlier. But I felt like I didn't have to perform. Not that anybody was putting pressure on me to perform before,
It's just the
but
culture.
it's a culture. And I even think that goes back to even my experience as a 5 or 6 year old being molested. I lost control there in that situation. So being in control and even performing to an extent, putting on a mask. So that was all gone when I went to Virginia, and there was a freedom to just be. And
And so for you,
no,
you were probably getting acquainted with yourself in your own freedom, right? Because that was probably the first time you ever got to just kind of figure out maybe who you were.
yeah, yeah, it really was. And not and ultimately we know it was leading to a path of me getting to know God in a much
Sure.
deeper, personal, more intimate way for myself. But no, was it God's will? No, but it was God allowed, because had I never gone down this path, I would have never ever been at the place I'm at right now in Him. But yeah, I mean, to go back at that moment, getting to know myself, and and all these, whatever was in me, all these roots or whatever, I was they were starting to sprout, and
Yeah.
that crack that the enemy, because I was so surrounded by prayer and family um and and accountability, he had never really been able to penetrate those cracks. And so there, being away from all that and not underneath that covering, of submission and accountability, I was wide open. I
Yeah.
opened myself up.
Yeah. I just want to illustrate how very how very interesting it is that call came in for you, because when I graduated with my bachelor's, I was very actively pursuing pharmaceutical sales for lots of reasons. And I was called after applying lots of places. I was flown out to Dallas for an interview. I was one of 5 people nationwide out of 290 applicants, I think, that was selected for this interview process. And I ultimately didn't make it. But the competition for pharmaceutical sales is really, really steep. And, they told us to create what's called a brag book. And I mean, like, we really prepped, had to be prepared. It was very, very competitive. And so for them to just call you out of the blue, offer you the job in the moment, I mean, literally within hours after you met with them, that is very, very unheard of. And it was definitely a trap. But as you said, God allowed it, to bring you to where you are now.
You're exactly right, and it was. I believe it was God allowed, ultimately to get me to this end, but just that call, and then the one that moved me to Austin. I mean, there were 367 applicants for that position, for that oncology position, and I had no oncology experience, but God opened that door. So, which got me out of Alexandria, and um, which I wasn't living for God even here. I was doing things here, but it got me out of here because I had gotten in trouble in Alexandria a couple of times, or pulled over, but I got out of it because I mean, I was very good friends with the mayor and the chief of police,
Yeah.
and this, that, and the other. So it just went away, when
Mm-hmm.
I would get pulled over driving drunk or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Austin, that can't happen. That didn't happen. I had a couple um, that I was like that I didn't get out of. Thank God they were reduced in some kind of road construction violate or whatever. But I paid for it dearly financially, But so
Yeah.
I couldn't get away with the things there that I could here. So God has a way of moving you and moving you
Yeah.
around to get you to a
Yeah.
point of, yeah.
Did you feel like you were suicidal when you were in the 5-day rehab, or was that just their assumption because of the level you were drinking at?
I felt, well, first of all, I don't feel I was suicidal, but I was at a place where I didn't care.
Mm-hmm.
If I passed, I passed. If I was just in a deep place of, I just didn't care,
And so there was
honestly.
no conviction, there was no fear of the Lord, there was no thought of heaven and hell, there was none of that
Mm-mm.
was present.
No, I was in a just I would have to say it was a deep depression and oppression,
Mm-hmm.
that just hit me that day I flew into Houston. It was
Mm-hmm.
deep, and I was in a deep dark place. So, but as you know, so no, I wasn't actively trying to, but I didn't care. But when I got there, it was their decision, because of the blood alcohol level.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's just a miracle that you survived that. That's
Yeah,
poison. I mean, that could have definitely killed you, as you well know.
absolutely.
So, Dustin, what did you learn? I heard you say 2 different rehabs plus the 5-day uh, stint. What did you learn about addiction, um, and about yourself needing to go to the different rehabs? Like, for people that say, "I'm not going to rehab. I've been already 5 times." What would you say to parents about kids that have, you know, in and out of rehabs and it just doesn't seem to work? What did you learn about that process?
The process of rehabs, I do think they're important to get you to a place of sobriety and get you to a place of, where you can think clearly. I I feel like it's kind of what we're trying to do with High Hope. I feel like and we're a network of resources. It is a resource. You've got to put out the fire before you rebuild the house, and so I feel like that's an
Yeah.
area. Put out the fire. I feel like with us, I mean, people may come to us, not substance abuse, but it may be, trauma. Where we need a counselor such as yourself or some of the ones we have on our teams, and we have to send them there to put out that whatever fire they're going through, whatever
Right.
trauma, whatever mental, um, illness, whatever it is, depression, anxiety, and then we try to, then coach them and rebuild that house. And but so I feel like rehab. for me, got me sober. In the 30-day rehab, I found very little God. It got me sober, and I got out and I drank again. The year long one, I feel like I honestly didn't, as far as the program itself, I didn't enjoy the. It was some pretty miserable conditions, and work conditions, and it was. I don't want to say miserable. It was just hard work. It was. You were the whole time you were there. And on purpose, they did not tell you the next day's schedule or what you're doing, so that you would learn to let go of control.
Yes.
So yeah, and submission, and they did it in a pretty harsh way, which but I feel like going back, I look back and I feel like that was one of the best years of my life, because I did give myself to getting into the Word. And that's what I feel like was such a gift to me, because that's where I really begin to, God, not I, but God began to transform my mind. And He told me, God spoke to me, and Kathy, look, I know it's not audibly. I know God's voice. We all
Right.
know God's voice, the way He speaks to us individually.
Yeah.
But He said, He had not only told me during that time, if you want me, you're going to have to dig for me. I'm here, but you're going to have to dig for me. But He also said, look, I don't want you to conform to what you feel. I want you to be transformed. And so He began doing that. God began doing that by me digging into the Word and washing my mind with the Word. And that's why I'm so huge on the Word, the Word, the Word.
Yeah. Yeah. I think most backsliders that come back have a love for the Word because it is what carried us. And I grew up in church. I never read the Bible ever. I knew the stories. I couldn't tell you where they were unless it was Jonah, you know.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget sitting in church, maybe the first or second year after I had come back, and my colleague now was preaching on the children of Israel. And I realized I've heard this term like my whole life. I have no idea who they are or what this term means.
Yeah.
And so I asked
Yeah.
him after church, and from that moment, I just determined to read the Bible and to really learn what all this stuff that I've been told was that I had no understanding in.
Yeah.
But I do hear that a lot. Backsliders, they just fall in love with the Bible because it is living, it is breathing, it is our instruction, it is God's love manifest through His Word to us, and it does have power.
It does have power, and it's not somebody else's word that
Right.
God's given them. It's Him directly speaking in some different way to you, or something that just leaps off that page to you that He wants to speak. So yes, I do get encouraged by others preaching and hearing their word, but there's nothing like getting in there and God speaking to me directly,
Yeah.
just me and Him. So that personal time is so vital.
Yeah. So what was the process once you got back to Louisiana? Well, before I ask that question, I want to go back to something you said. God told you He wasn't looking for you to conform. What does that mean for a male? Because I hear that as a female, and I think about all the things that we're taught, in terms of holiness coming up in church. But what pressure were you feeling as a man to conform, that God was very clearly speaking to you? That wasn't what He was looking for. What was that like for you?
It was just any expectations of preconceived expectations of things that I may have been brought up in. And look, some things, I'll be honest, at that point, it meant something a little different to me than it does now. But what I look back and I know He was saying is and it goes back to our curriculum and our process. A lot of times, you just said it, people come in and we expect them to jump from faith and believing in God to and virtue and getting filled with the Holy Ghost, and then bam, jump all the way down to godliness. There's several more down the list
Right, right.
before they've even reached knowledge and temperance and patience. And so I didn't know that at the time that God was speaking that to me, but it was I
Mm-hmm.
want you to be transformed, and only He can transform. Only God can
Right,
transform me,
right.
can you, anybody else. And so He was leading me on a journey of, don't just do this because you feel like this is expected of you or somebody else expects this of you. Don't just, if you're doing that, it's for the wrong, it's for man, it's not for me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So He had to take me through a process of, and I never realized this until we really started getting into this curriculum. I never really realized that's the power of His transformation is it, and
Mm-hmm.
it's a step by step for me, Kathy. And it's an ongoing process for all of
Yeah,
us, but
right.
it was really initially a slow process for me to let go of such a, even though I had lost everything, that God had allowed me to be successful in everything, to let go of such a life of that satisfied my flesh so much. I had one hand in the, or one foot in the world, one foot in Him, and I clung on to that for a long time, trying to make a lot of things work
Mm-hmm.
my way, and
Mm-hmm.
let God have a little bit of it. And so yeah, it was more, don't just conform because of expectations you felt in the past. I want to
Mm-hmm.
transform you and I'm going to lead you. And that was just going on with more of the finding Him and finding out why some of
Yeah.
these some of these guardrails and things are in place, and that
Right.
are in the Word are in
Yes.
place because they're going to
Yeah.
protect you
Yeah.
from further, you know.
Yeah. I've come
He
to really appreciate the guardrails that were put in place as a kid. Didn't understand them then, but now I can understand, wow, that was really for our protection, which is what they always told us. But it didn't make
yeah,
sense, from a place of innocence when you don't know any better. But now from an adulthood, it makes a whole lot of sense. And I,
yeah.
I would I would guess it takes time to let go of the expectations that are so ingrained and the ones you place on yourself too, you know, because they just come so naturally. Like I know some people I've talked with coming back into our church culture, they really struggle to just stay in their lane and not automatically just conform. Like it's easier to conform than it is to stay true to where you're at in God. And that's something I think we also don't talk about much, because I used to tell the Lord conformity would have been the easiest thing for me. And when I first prayed back through when I was 28, I did all those things. I conformed all the way. Every single thing that I was taught as a kid, I did all the things, and it didn't work, and then I had to go back out and relearn all the things over again. And so how do you help people? I think it's a trust issue, but what are you discovering in the curriculum of how to help people just learn to trust that God has them where He wants them and that He will change them in time as they grow in Him?
I think it's that's a process that takes grace, truth, and time, and that's honestly the Dr. Townsend. That's his growth, character growth trunk of his tree, and 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 that's biblical. It starts with grace. I mean, where they are
Mm-hmm.
at that moment, accepting that even though what they're seeing, feeling, hearing may not be truth, it's their truth at that point.
Right.
And
So important.
so I'm gonna listen. and become curious, because I think by doing that, it's going to open up a dialogue that's going to allow me to find out the real
Mm-hmm.
root,
Mm-hmm.
and find out the truth. And that by doing that, you're establishing that trust, that dialogue between them and you. And I think also, Kathy, it's being very open and transparent, as we talked about earlier. Need to get better at, of opening up with our lived experience, with what
Mm-hmm.
we've been through, so that they can
Mm-hmm.
say, "Oh, this person gets me." I can't tell you the amount of people that I've sat down with. Look, kids half my age, even more than half my age, have no business trusting or opening up and confiding in me. And their mom or dad will reach out and say, "Look, will you just talk to him? I don't know if he'll." And we'll meet, and immediately, and a lot of this, it's all God who allows that, that to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But when I open up and tell them my story, where I've been, how deep, hopeless, by me just opening up and being transparent, and like, I haven't always been like this, and I'm still not there, but I've been exactly in the spot you're at. So transparency breeds trust, obviously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So just by giving them grace and understanding where they're at, telling them your truth allows them to open up and trust you and they'll tell you their truth.
Mm-hmm.
And then just being able to walk along with them, and however long that takes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it starts in the beginning with that faith and trust component, and in
Mm-hmm.
themselves, believing in themselves, believing in others to open up,
Right.
and ultimately that trust and faith in God. So I try not to get that out of order, because if it's and you know the story of your previous guest going to coffee, and all they talked about wasn't God for how long. It was just a connection, building a
Yeah.
connection and a relationship, and it's
Mm-hmm.
got to start there.
Right.
Connection.
Yeah. How long before you came back to Louisiana and walked in the church doors that fateful day, to when God began to deal with you about High Hope Ministry? How long of a
That,
process was that?
that was a 4 or 5 year process. I came back for really for good in 2018, and I began. When I came back in 2018, I had 2017 at the end of, or no, the beginning of January of 2018. I was actually arrested for a non-alcohol related this incident. I was actually, it was an alcohol related incident, but not on my part. I was actually, of all the things that I had done and should have been arrested for, and there were plenty, um, driving, just foolish things, driving drunk, drugs, whatever. Um, this one I wasn't, but God used this one, and I was arrested, brought to jail, and I thought I could have bonded out. I just needed somebody to sign, sign whatever they call that. And my dad refused. He said, "No, I'm not going to do it this time," which was hard, hard on him. But I
I
give
bet it
him
was.
honor. I give him honor, and to stand up and make that decision. That was true love, believe it or not.
Mm-hmm.
And it ended up, so I thought it was only going to be a week in there till I went before the judge, and it was terrible. It wasn't just your little county jail. It was a room full of 50, 60 men. It was, this skinny boy here is not made or built for jail. I wasn't, so I was scared to death. And it ended up being 3 weeks, because it kept getting pushed back. And I was going crazy. And God spoke to me there and said, if you don't get it right this time, Dustin, he said, you're not going to be able to handle the next time. So that was enough. So I moved home in 2018 and said, God, I'm submitting to you, to my pastors, to my organization, everything, whatever it takes. This is it. And so I began just praying, and I began getting up to the church. I was going twice a day. I was going at 4 in the morning. That's a whole nother story. And then I was going at night, till from about 6 to about 9, and just pouring myself in. And then God began dealing with me organically on, my parents had started an amazing ministry because of me in 2015, Hope Ministry for prodigals and their families. And it was really, really connecting with families, and helping pray with them and give them advice and give them counsel. A phenomenal ministry that's carried them all over the country. I think it's in 43 or 44 countries, or I'm sorry, states at this point. They've set up Hope in various churches and in numerous countries, I know. Um, so they had set that up. They have a conference biannually every 2 years. And God began dealing with me. Well, you need to walk along some of the prodigals themselves, those that are walking through it, those that are really fighting. So it started out, Kathy, I was actually driving, flying places, doing things, and sleeping in apartments with some of these who were in active addiction. And that can get pretty heavy. I mean, and they call you at all hours, which is great. I mean, but I was single at the time, and then when God allowed me to become, put the best thing that ever happened in my life, Leanne. You have a family now, and an 8-year-old, and so there's shifting responsibility. So we started really not getting away from that at all, but how we reach and how we
Mm-hmm.
address that. And we're doing a lot of that through via Zoom, via podcast, such as you are, and then going out. God's allowed me to go out and just He's opened doors in churches and just speak. And then I hope at the beginning, or in September, started launching these in-person connection weekends, and Friday, Saturday, Sunday, where we go to churches. And Friday night is just connecting with, whether it be prodigals or whether it be people who are just hurting. I mean, if you are
Mm-hmm.
at a church and your family or somebody, your neighbor down the street or your coworker is going through a divorce or a loss of a child, or just a terrible time in their life, we come in on a Friday night to somebody's home and
Mm-hmm.
just have a time of connection. And we have a great little team, Leanne and then Terry Fisher, who is a worship leader, travels with Charity Gale, tours with her around the world, and they just have a heart for worship leaders. But they'll play some acoustic music for a little bit on a Friday night, and then after that, it's just eat and connect.
Mm-hmm.
And then a great time on Saturday and Sunday of connecting with people. So we've kind of optimized technology and trying to really build our resources and connect our network. And God has just brought people to us
Mm-hmm.
as far as
Mm-hmm.
counselors and connected us with people like
Mm-hmm.
yourself. And
Mm-hmm.
we're so excited. It's been really, the revamp has really started in August of last year, so it's still so fresh. And the
Mm-hmm.
things that God is doing right now is just, I'm so excited about the future.
Yeah. I did. Yeah, me too. I feel like God's really dealing with the prodigals to come home.
He is.
Yeah. So when you got married and found your wife, you had to sort of switch gears, and God began to put this ministry on your heart more. Was it already formalized? High Hope Ministries already formalized, or was it just something you were doing out of the overflow of your own desire to help others?
It was already, I mean, we had already incorporated as far as a 501(c). But it was more mentoring personally, one-on-one, which is
Gotcha.
still, which is still important.
Right.
With the encouragement of one of our assistant pastors who was a Townsend graduate, he said, look, he'd been encouraging me for a couple of years. You ought to look at the executive coaching and consulting program
Mm-hmm.
there, out there in Irvine. And
Mm-hmm.
so I said, you know what? I dove in, was going to just get a certificate. I said, I'm gonna get my master's. I fell in love with it so much. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
doing that, and it has changed me actually. It's done more for me, I think, than honestly but it's put such good tools. And so yes, we just kind of recently pivoted, and it's to anybody hurting, because I feel like it's not just prodigals. There are people not in the church. There are people in the church
Yes.
who need healing, who have gone through. Um, they may be stuck in one of these phases that we're doing as far as our curriculum. They may be still at a point where they haven't moved from one to the other, or they skip
Right.
past. And I think it's beneficial to all. So we've just pivoted, and they're also going through some traumatic stuff themselves. So
Right.
I love what the church is doing and addressing as far as recovery and people with
Mm-hmm.
substance abuse. I, f- I feel like there's a big door, though, for people also sitting on the church pews that need
Yeah.
healing as well, because
Yeah.
they could be one step from becoming a prodigal.
Right. Right. Are you finding that there is a lot more? Are you hearing more stories of those that have been molested as kids as you've done this work that are sitting on the pew?
I have. I
Yeah.
have, yeah, more than you know. It's more prevalent than I would have thought. Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. I read a study in 2000 or 2001, um, and it was 6 out of 10 people had been victims of sexual abuse. And I just did a quick inventory in my own life. I had boyfriends, I had best friends, I had people at church, like so many people in my own circle. I felt like at the time that number was spot on. But now that, that's been 25 years ago. And I personally think that that number is so much more increased. I think it's more common that people are sexually abused than it is uncommon. Even in a Christian home, it happens, sadly, but I do think that if people can start addressing and not feel like they're not Christian enough, or that they should just believe more or have more faith and it just goes away. I think if they could just start to really, like you said, be transparent and begin to heal those wounds, I think that would make a huge difference also in the body.
You're exactly right. And what I heard you say, have more faith. How can you have, we know every man is given a measure of faith, but how can you have more faith when you really feel like you have no faith? I mean, you
Right.
you have
But
to
you know
dig
how
in
they
and get,
they judge
yeah,
themselves, that
yeah,
condemnation that comes from the enemy. But
yeah, yeah.
so many Christians really think they're not a good Christian because they're struggling, and that's just a lie, I think, from the pit of hell.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Kathy.
Yeah. Well, Dustin, so High Hope Ministries, you guys offer coaching, you have resources for prodigals and the families. Your dad has Hope for the Prodigals Ministry, your dad and mom. And by the way, both of these ministries can be found on social media. Dustin also has a podcast, and it's under High Hope Ministries on YouTube.
Correct.
Yeah, and
Correct.
you interview some prodigals, but you also interview others as well. I mean, is your podcast geared towards one particular thing, or is it just topic based?
No, it's pretty topic based. It's anybody who's ever been through any type of trauma or addiction. It can be whether it be substance abuse, as I said, it can be a single mom that's walked through, infidelity in the marriage, or
Yeah,
vice versa.
yeah,
Whatever it could be, it's somebody who's walked through something traumatic, or is walking through in some
hmm,
cases, and has overcome that. We even have we've had some great pastors who have walked through some very tough roads. I mean, one of the ones that sticks out is AJ Holloway, who is
I
a
listened.
pastor. Yeah, and his losing a child to a house fire and having to watch that, um, and how he overcame that after even having thoughts of just wanting to go be with his child.
Yeah.
So it's addressing that and how they got through that, what carried them through that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because I feel like we're all going through something. So if we can address all these things in some way,
Yeah.
somehow, hopefully
Mm-hmm.
somebody will resonate with somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like God has put some pretty good guests, and we have some good ones coming up. And yes, we're on social media: Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and we also have a website, highhopeministries.com. They can connect. But I have to unreservedly give honor to my mom and my dad because they started Hope Ministries, like I said, for me
Mm-hmm.
in
Mm-hmm.
2015. A lot of these connections, a lot of these, the reason I'm here, a reason this
Mm-hmm.
this High Hope Ministries here is because of them and their continual prayer and support and dedication to the ministry that they built. So I give them the highest honor, and um,
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
deserve.
I thought it was wonderful. Your dad, when I spoke with him, he said they started that obviously because of you, but feeling like they learned what they did wrong as parents of prodigals and how to come alongside other parents as prodigals. And I bet it's very different than what we might think it is, whatever they felt. I haven't heard their full testimony, but it's so needful because my cousin, who was my first interview, his mom and dad both passed away before they ever got to see him come home. But we know those memorial prayers that they prayed, have come up before the Lord, and the Lord met him in prison and filled him with the Holy Ghost in prison. And, he's just come out on fire for God. And his parents never got to see the fulfillment of that, And so I think there's a whole generation out there of parents whose children are still prodigals that would really benefit from the ministry of your parents. We don't
Oh
see
yeah.
that. We don't see that very often, So I'm grateful. I was blessed just talking to your dad and hearing the heart behind their ministry, which then of course he directed me to you. And I just am so encouraged by all of it. God is just doing the work, He's just doing it.
He's putting together such an amazing army for these last
Yeah.
days, and I mean, I was going to say one by one, but I mean, Kathy, as you know, they're coming in droves, and they're coming in and just joining us, and that's the way. Uh, the end time revival. It's going to be a revival of prodigals. That's going to be. I firmly believe that's going to be the catalyst to the harvest. I mean,
Yeah.
these prodigals are going to rise up, and then they're going to bring in this harvest, and
Hmm.
um, it's exciting but humbling at the same time, just to
Yeah.
be a little part of it. And
Peace.
that's why what you're doing is so important.
Yeah.
Just getting this out there, any platform we can.
Yeah. Well, it is. I just feel like it's such a miracle that God allows, like you said, be a little teeny part of it, because
Mhm.
I wanted it my whole life, but I just never been where I am today in Him, which I'm so grateful for because I know the miracle that I am. I know you know the miracle that you are because no one knows where we've been better than ourselves. But God's love is so great, and the world really does not have anything to offer in comparison to His love.
There's no counterfeit to that.
Yeah, there's not.
No.
And so for the people out there, Dustin and his High Hope ministry team is going to be coming to Visalia to our conference, Unshackled conference. So we're so grateful that the team is coming. But, if you want to meet him, talk to him, get involved with his ministry, it's a great opportunity for anybody who's interested to come. They'll be in California at our church. So that's super exciting.
We are so excited. The team is, we can't wait, Kathy.
So I always end with 2 questions, Dustin. What would you say to the prodigal who hasn't come home yet?
To the prodigal that hasn't come home yet, I would honestly, I would tell them that God loves you where you are right now.
Yeah.
If you can allow that just to sink in above anything else, any other noise you're hearing, is that he loves you as much now where you're at as he did before anything that you've walked through.
Yeah, that's
His
good.
love hasn't changed. And if you can just accept that and trust that, that's really the loudest message and the only message I would want them to accept and receive in their spirit is he loves me as much now where
Yeah.
I am as he did before I ever made any bad decision, or even if I feel like my decisions right now are not bad, just know God loves you. Accept that, receive that, and just seek him with all your heart.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, that's so good. What would you say to the parents or a spouse of a prodigal?
I would say to the parents or a spouse of a prodigal is trust God. That's so hard to do. Show that one of the biggest things you can do, and that my parents did, is they kept walking and trusting God. Had they wavered in their faith, had they wavered in their trust, it would have affected me in such a negative way. So you being consistent and in your walk and in your faith is a testimony to your prodigal. That's the main thing. And then know that your prayers, yes, your prayers go where you can't, where nobody else can.
Right.
But the most important thing is like in my situation, your prayers sends people. Might not reach them. The words that they say, the parents say, or the spouse cannot reach them. But those prayers are going to be sent, and I pray for God to send people like he did in my life that can minister and reach to me, because they're going to open up a lot faster and receive those from those godly people that God sends in their life, like he did with and I can't, I mean, the people in Austin, Kenneth and Wanda Phillips, the Hernandez family, Steve Miller. I shouldn't have started naming names, but God sent those people into my life through the prayers of my parents that ushered me and comforted me and walked alongside of me non-judgmentally. Mike and Tara Maxwell. I shouldn't have started naming people, but anyway, those people. He'll send those into their life if you'll pray, step back, and God's going to use people you never thought of to help bring your prodigals home. And that's what we want. That's what High Hope is trying to be, is some of those people that'll walk alongside when the parents just can't, and they're tired, exhausted, or their faith is, that's what my words to them would be.
Yeah, that's a good word. All right. Well, Dustin, nice to meet you via Zoom, see your face. Thank you so much for being here. And I love what you're doing in your ministry. And I look forward to seeing you soon.
Just about a month away. We can't wait, Kathy.
Okay. Well, God bless you. Thank you for doing this while you were sick. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Kathy. God gives us strength. We appreciate it.
Okay. And for everyone out there, thank you. And if you are a prodigal or have you been a prodigal, please reach out to us. We would love to hear from you. Bye-bye.
We are so glad you joined us. If you have a story of redemption or have worn the label of a backslider, we would love to hear from you. If you'd like to support our ministry, your donation will be tax deductible. Visit our website at kathychastain.com. We hope you will tune in for our next episode.